She was still wearing the ring. That's the detail that stuck with me. Not the words, not the smug way she looked over her shoulder before walking out, but the fact that she said those things with the same diamond band I put on her hand 23 years ago, still resting on her finger like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. You'll have the kids. Think about how you failed as a husband. She said it like she was reading a weather report. Like there was no doubt about it. Like the verdict had already been delivered, and she was just granting me the courtesy of a few supervised visitation hours while she danced around hotel bars pretending to be single. And maybe I would have reacted once. Maybe 5 years ago, or even last year, I'd have gotten pulled into the fight. I'd have asked who she was really going with, or why the hell she needed 5 days away from her family right after I'd taken on extra shifts to cover the twins' orthodontist bill. Maybe I would have raised my voice, slammed a cabinet, tried to salvage some dignity by acting outraged. But not now. Now, I dried my hands on the kitchen towel I'd folded an hour earlier, hung it back up on its hook, and turned to look at her. She was scrolling through flights. Her thumb barely paused as she waited for my reaction. She was baiting me, watching from the side of her vision like a bored cat waiting for the mouse to twitch. "Safe travels," I said. That was it. Her head tilted just enough to reveal a smirk. "That's it. No fight." I shook my head. She made a faint scoffing sound and left the room. The sound of her heels on the tile faded, and I turned back to the sink. The water had cooled, and the last dish sat half submerged in a soapy puddle. I cleaned it, dried it, and stacked it perfectly in the cabinet. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, looked at the calendar on the wall, and stared at the marked week. Girls' trip, written in pink gel pen with a little martini glass doodle beside it. She used the same pen to sign our youngest kid's field trip permission slip last week. Everything was a performance now. She wanted me to think about how I'd failed. Fine. But what she didn't expect, what she hadn't calculated in her long-running game of passive-aggressive chess, was that I already had. I'd been thinking about it for a long time. Like the time she accidentally left her email open on the laptop, and I saw the forwarded reservation to the Langford Hotel. 2 guests, King Suite, her name on the confirmation, and a reply from someone named M. The subject line read, "Can't wait to see you again." That was last fall. Or the time I got a call from the car dealership asking if we still wanted to move forward with the down payment on the SUV, one I'd never heard about. She told me she was test driving options and that it wasn't a big deal. Funny, because the financing application had both our names on it. She was smart, just not smart enough. Victoria didn't cheat the loud way. No lipstick stains, no perfume-drenched texts from strangers. She cheated like she argued, surgically, in silence. She made me feel paranoid for asking why she was home late. Told me I was emotionally stunted when I said I missed how we used to talk. Laughed when I brought up therapy. She didn't call it cheating. She called it self-care, freedom, finding herself. And I let her. Because when you're a man with kids, a mortgage, and a lifetime of just let it go packed into your spine, you learn to shrink. You learn to endure. You don't erupt, you erode. But she'd made a mistake. Not the cheating itself. I already suspected that. No, her mistake was announcing her contempt. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She thought she'd won. That I was too small, too worn down, too dad to do anything about it. She thought I was domesticated. Harmless. And maybe I was. Until she told me to think about how I'd failed. She didn't realize those words would echo back at her. I went into the garage and opened the locked cabinet behind the lawn equipment. The one she hadn't looked at in years. Inside was a gray binder, thick with tabs and paper that smelled faintly of dust and engine oil. It was full of every contingency plan I'd ever made, but never pulled the trigger on. Documents my father gave me before he passed. Notes from a family estate lawyer we met once over whiskey. A letter marked, "Only if absolutely necessary." She didn't know I'd kept it. She didn't know I'd updated it last spring. She didn't know I'd been talking to someone for months. Someone with power over things she never thought to question. Trust accounts. Joint ownership clauses. The fine print on the house title that we refinanced when she insisted we needed a pool. I sat at the workbench, turned on the desk lamp, and started flipping through the tabs. One by one. Clause A. Irrevocable trust amendment. Not yet. Clause B. Primary custodial revision. Keep this for later. Clause C. Spousal asset protection trigger. Now we're getting somewhere. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Cold, simple math. She wanted space. She'd get it. She wanted me to think. I would. But I wouldn't be thinking about how I'd failed. I'd be thinking about how to finish what I started the moment she smirked at me and walked out of the room, still wearing the ring. Not because it meant anything to her, but because she forgot it still meant something to me. And that's the part that would ruin her. The hinges of the old cabinet groaned like something alive as I twisted the key. I hadn't opened it in years, not since before my dad passed. There wasn't much inside. A plastic box of screwdrivers, a dusty tin full of odd nails, and behind it all, a waterproof binder with a cracked spine. I pulled it out gently like it was a fossil. It practically hummed in my hands. The garage was still, quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock I never bothered to reset after the last power outage. Sunlight slanted through the window, cutting across the dust in long golden bars. The kind of morning where nothing feels urgent, except it was. For the first time in decades, something in me wasn't content to just hold steady. I was done being a buffer, done cushioning everyone else's choices. I laid the binder flat on the workbench, wiped the cover once, and opened it to the first divider tab, contingency. Not in some paranoid doomsday sense, just a failsafe, a fallback plan I'd been building slowly over the years, layer by layer. Every time Victoria gave me another reason to wonder who she really was beneath the charm. The first document was a notarized property agreement, dated 4 years ago. I remembered that day clearly, not because of the meeting, but because it was the same day Victoria said she didn't have time to attend our son's school play. She was too tired. She'd gone to bed early. I found out later she was at a wine bar downtown. The timeline didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that every lie she thought slipped by me hadn't. Behind that, a trust formation amendment with my name and the kids' names, but not hers. I flipped past the papers until I reached the thick envelope, sealed and stamped. Contingency. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. A letter I wrote after the first time I caught her with a hotel reservation that didn't include me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sentimental. It was a roadmap, written by a man who had finally stopped making excuses. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I reached a number I hadn't used in nearly a decade. Arthur Langston. Not a lawyer, not officially. He was a trustee, an estate architect. My parents had used him when they converted the family property to a trust, and I remembered the way he'd spoken. Careful, measured, the kind of man who read every sentence twice before speaking once. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did. Langston. It's Alan Callister, I said. We met a long time ago, through my father, Benjamin. There was a pause. Then, yes, I remember. The hardware distribution estate, correct? That's the one. I need your help, Arthur. Another pause. He didn't ask why. Just, is this a matter of urgency? It's time. That was all I said. He gave me a meeting slot within 2 hours. By 11:30, I was sitting in a discreet corner office above a dental clinic, papers splayed out on a cherrywood desk. Arthur hadn't aged much. Still wore the same cufflinks and the same expression, somewhere between a chess master and an undertaker. He didn't waste time. This clause here, C3, he said, tapping the trust document with a fountain pen. It allows for spousal exclusion under breach of fiduciary trust. You understand the burden of proof. I do, I said. And I have it. I slid over a USB drive. Inside, photos, transaction logs, email confirmations, and one particularly damning spreadsheet Victoria forgot to delete, showing a withdrawal from our joint educational fund for what she called wellness retreat, EZ. The amount? $4,862. I'd called the number. It was a hotel. In Sedona. For couples. Arthur examined the documents for a few minutes in silence. Then he looked up. I can execute this. Before she returns, I said. I want the trigger pulled while she's still posting mojito selfies. He nodded. We'll have to expedite. But yes, you've built this carefully. She thought I was building birdhouses out in the garage, I said. Arthur gave a tight smile. Quiet men build dangerous things. He handed me a folder I hadn't seen before. Slim, pale gray, no label. I opened it, a draft letter. Formal termination of spousal access to all trust funds, including co-owned property and investment assets. There was a highlighted section, Clause C, triggered by material breach of fiduciary integrity. And what about the house? I asked. Arthur reached into his own file and pulled out a second document. Your name is listed as the sole mortgage underwriter. We simply transfer ownership into the irrevocable structure. She'll have no legal standing without contesting, which would expose everything. I finished. He nodded. Exactly. Then he paused. Alan, does her father know? I looked up. About the scholarship fund? Arthur raised a brow. I've kept him out of it, but I think it's time he understood what she did with his signature. He tapped the edge of the folder. Then I suggest you deliver this in person, preferably with witnesses. I left the office a little before 1 o'clock. The sky was overcast, the parking lot quiet. I sat in my truck for a moment before starting the engine, staring at the passenger seat where the sealed folder lay. This wasn't a rescue mission. I wasn't trying to win her back or punish her into remorse. This was surgery, precise, necessary, and irreversible. And the next time she walked through that door, she'd walk into a house she didn't own, with a husband she didn't know, and a father who would finally see her for who she really was. It came in at 9:43 a.m., right as I was pulling weeds around the side fence. The ones she always said were my job, because you're the only one with time. The sun was already climbing, and I was kneeling in the dirt with sweat sliding down the back of my neck when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen stopped me. Nate Ralston. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Old work buddy. Someone Victoria had always labeled a bad influence, because he once suggested we go to Vegas for a weekend. I opened the message without thinking. Thought you should see this, man. Didn't know what the deal was, but yeah. Attached was a screenshot. Instagram. Victoria's handle. It was a photo, taken at night, on a rooftop bar somewhere sunny. Probably Miami. She was in a low-cut dress I'd never seen before. Neon lights threw streaks of purple and gold across the frame. She was laughing with her head tilted just so, eyes closed in a practiced way, like a teenager performing confidence. One hand held a tall drink with a jalapeno slice floating on top. The other rested casually on a man's thigh. Not just rested, curled. The caption said, "Freedom tastes like mezcal hot pepper cocktail glass #girls weekend, #new energy, #no judgment." Cute. But it wasn't the hand that got me. Not even the man, whose face was only half visible from the angle. It was the reflection. In the polished glass behind them, you could see a mirrored version of the moment. And in that reflection, clearer than in the foreground, was his hand, with a gold wedding band. Her hand? No ring. That was the detail that landed. Not the audacity, not the performance. Just the quiet, careful erasure of who she was supposed to be. And not just from me, from herself, from her kids, from the very idea of responsibility. I didn't reply to Nate. I just locked the screen, put the phone back in my pocket, and went back to pulling weeds. 10 minutes later, I was at my workbench, flipping open the file Arthur had handed me. I hadn't planned to send the letter until she got back. I wanted her to see it in person, to read it on the front porch while her father stood beside her. But that photo, that was her signature. Proof that the plan wasn't reactionary, it was necessary. I pulled up her profile on my tablet. It was a carefully curated fantasy. The usual staged photos of brunch plates, beach chairs, spa robes. But every single one told a story she didn't think I could read. Photo 1. 2 wine glasses, captioned sisterhood vibes, but only one plate. Photo 2. A blurry hand pouring champagne into a flute with manicured fingers, not hers. Photo 3. Her standing on a dock at sunset, tagging some girl I'd never heard of. The same friend she said she was visiting when she skipped our anniversary last year. I clicked through every tag location, every heart emoji, every half-naked bikini mirror shot with captions like, "Doing me 2 hearts." It was a little symphony of plausible deniability. No explicit proof. Just the kind of breadcrumb trail she could laugh off if confronted. You're being controlling. You're reading too much into things. It's just a photo. It's Instagram. Everyone does it. She knew the playbook because she'd rehearsed it for years. But now I had context. Now I had documentation. And now I had the damn timeline. That rooftop photo, timestamped from the same night she told our son she was too exhausted to FaceTime. I remembered him walking away from the living room with slumped shoulders, trying not to cry when she didn't answer his call. I remembered the way I said, "She probably just fell asleep, bud." And now I see she was wide awake, with some married guy's hand on her thigh and the caption, "Freedom tastes like mezcal." It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was dereliction. It was a mother who'd swapped out her kids for cocktails and hashtags. And still, I didn't call her. Didn't comment. Didn't message. I printed the photo instead. On thick matte paper. Clean border. No annotations. I slipped it into a folder labeled Exhibits and slid it under the documents Arthur and I were compiling for the trust enforcement. It was more symbolic than anything else. She could delete the post, change the caption, block me, lie through her teeth. But she couldn't erase what she'd already shown the world. Later that evening, I put the kids to bed, told them their mom was probably having fun and would call soon. I didn't lie. I just didn't elaborate. My daughter asked if we could bake something when mommy got back. I said sure, then tucked her in with the same smile I'd been practicing in mirrors. And then, once the house was quiet, I sat on the porch with a legal pad and wrote 3 names down. Victoria, her employer, her father. Under each, I wrote the phrase, make them look. Don't let them blink. I knew this was only the beginning, that a photo wouldn't end it. But it was the first blow to the facade. The moment the curtain snagged and ripped just enough to let the audience see the wires. She thought she was winning the story. But that post? That was the moment she gave the plot back to me. The office smelled like pine oil and old money. Arthur Langston didn't go in for modern minimalism. He ran his firm like time had stopped in 1987. Thick drapes, green-shaded lamps, framed black and white photos of himself with judges and dead governors. The kind of place where everything felt permanent, like once you signed something inside, the world had no choice but to obey. I arrived early, as usual. Didn't want to keep the man waiting, even though I was the one setting things in motion now. His assistant offered me water in a glass that looked hand-blown. I declined and waited, staring at the same brass clock I remembered from when I was here with my father, 22 years ago, restructuring the estate after Mom's stroke. Back then, I was just the son with a notepad, scribbling notes while the adults talked around me. Now I was the one with the plan. Arthur came in precisely at 10 o'clock, his suit impeccable, his tie so sharp it looked starched. He didn't waste time, sat down, opened a legal folder, and said, I reviewed the evidence. Clause C is viable. I nodded. Then we're triggering it. His eyebrow twitched, just slightly. That was a big move. Clause C was the nuclear option. Once activated, it would freeze Victoria out of every asset tied to the trust. No appeal, no second chances, no messy court battles. Just gone. You understand what that means, he said, not as a warning, but as confirmation. It removes her from all claims, I said. He leaned back in his chair. House, retirement portfolio, liquid assets tied to the business distribution from your father's holdings. She'll be legally entitled to nothing that originated from the Callister Trust. Correct. And the children? They remain primary beneficiaries. The 529 accounts stay untouched, for now. Arthur glanced down at the photo I'd included in the exhibits folder, the one from the rooftop bar, then flipped past it like he was reading a menu. I want the property split executed before she lands, I said. I don't want her stepping foot in that house thinking she still owns a doorknob. He nodded again. Already drafted. We'll file it through the county clerk's office this afternoon. I'll send confirmation once the title is officially reassigned into the trust. I could feel something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet. Just a lever being pulled. The gears were turning. And for once, they were turning in my direction. Arthur turned to the side drawer of his desk, pulled out another folder, and laid it gently on the table like it was radioactive. There's one more thing, he said. The foundation. Specifically, the scholarship fund your father-in-law co-signed when you and Victoria merged finances. I kept my face still. What about it? Arthur opened the folder, slid out a series of printed banking statements. Clean, numbered, highlighted. There are 5 withdrawals totaling just over $19,000, all labeled education consulting, none of which have any matching receipts or vendor IDs, but cross-referenced with her credit card activity. Well, she used those exact amounts on spa retreats, airfare, and one rather creative healing conference in Sedona. The same one I found in her emails last year, I said quietly. Arthur continued, if your father-in-law were to be made aware of this, it would be compelling, particularly since his name is still listed on the account as secondary guarantor. He could be liable for any penalties if it's audited. I sat back in the chair and exhaled slowly. I hadn't told him yet about any of it. Victoria had painted me as checked out, lazy, emotionally unavailable. Her father ate it up, always looked at me like I was wasting her potential. The few times I hinted at what was going on, he'd shrug and say, women need to feel free, Alan. Loosen up. Freedom, huh? She's counting on his blind loyalty, I said. He doesn't see her. He sees what she lets him see. Arthur nodded once. Then I suggest you show him something he can't unsee. He slid the folder across the desk to me. It was heavier than it looked, thick with undeniable math. Victoria could charm her way through any confrontation, but she couldn't argue with ledger entries and time-stamped statements. I'll deliver this myself, I said. Good, Arthur replied. I've included a summary letter you can hand him along with it. Neutral tone, just the facts. If he still wants to defend her afterward, that's his mistake to make. He stood, and so did I. No handshakes. We were past formality. I tucked the folder into my briefcase and turned toward the door. Alan, he said as I opened it. I've worked with men in your position before. Most wait until it's too late. You didn't. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked out into the daylight. The world outside was the same as when I went in. Cars passing, people on lunch breaks, some teenager blaring music from a cracked Civic, but I felt like I was walking through something hollowed out. Lighter somehow. Emptier in a good way. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to survive the emotional tides of my marriage. I wasn't clinging to the illusion of normalcy for the kids. I wasn't hoping she'd come back to me or see my worth or stop punishing me for whatever invisible sin she'd assigned. I was acting, not for vengeance, for protection, of my kids, of their future, of my sanity. I drove straight to her father's house, folder in hand, rehearsing exactly how little I'd need to say. It was the kind of call that usually started with small talk. Instead, his voice came through the speaker like he was already suspicious. I was in the middle of organizing old tax documents in the den when my phone buzzed and showed his name, Robert Hensley. Father-in-law, retired insurance executive. Speaks like every sentence is a closing argument. The kind of man who never asks if you're okay, just assumes he already knows. Alan, he said. Victoria's been vague. I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit in the silence for a beat too long, just enough to make him lean in mentally. She said you were spiraling, he added. Should I be concerned? There it was. The opening jab. Framed as care, laced with accusation. Classic Robert. I kept my tone level. Not at all. No. He sounded almost disappointed. In fact, I said, I could use your help. With a delivery. A pause. He wasn't expecting that. What kind of delivery? Legal. Precise. No drama. Another pause. Alan, what exactly is going on? I'd prefer not to explain it over the phone, I said. But I'll give you the basics. I've initiated a set of trust reallocations. It affects Victoria directly. She'll find out when she gets back from her trip. I think it's best she hears it from someone she still respects. That word, respects, hung in the air. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he cleared his throat. You're talking about divorce? No. I'm talking about a surgical correction. I'm preserving what's left of what she hasn't already spent or sabotaged. Think of it like a financial firewall. You're being cryptic, Alan. Because I have documentation, and you'll want to see it in person. He hesitated. Then, cautiously, why involve me? She used your name, Robert, I said, on multiple financial authorizations, college fund withdrawals, travel reimbursements, spa invoices labeled as tutoring consultations. Your signature's on an account that's about to be audited, whether you like it or not. Silence. I let that sink in. I didn't co-sign anything recently, he muttered. No. You co-signed it 10 years ago. She just kept using it. Another silence. I softened my voice. This doesn't have to be messy. But if you walk in blind when she comes home, she'll steamroll you. She's counting on it. I could hear him breathing. Slow, deliberate. The sound of an old man realizing that he may have bet on the wrong version of his daughter for too long. What do you want me to do? Meet me at the house the day she returns. 9 a.m. sharp. I'll text you the address. I'll hand you an envelope. You hand it to her. I won't say a word. Just let her open it in front of you. That's it. Bring a camera, I added. He scoffed. Come on, Alan. You'll want documentation. For your own protection. I won't record anything. But you might. You need to hear how she reacts when the house is no longer hers. When the accounts are closed. When the tuition plan she drained is tied to your name. His voice dropped to a low rumble. You're serious. Robert, I said. If you weren't her father, you'd have filed fraud charges already. But I know that's not your instinct. So instead, I'm giving you a moment to protect yourself. He exhaled, long and slow. I pictured him standing by that ridiculous mahogany desk in his study, surrounded by golf trophies and books he never read, thinking, trying to square the version of his daughter he raised with the one that signed off on 5-star spa charges using funds meant for her kids. You're certain about all this? He asked. I'm certain enough to dismantle a life I spent 20 years building, I said. Another pause. Text me the address, he said finally, and I'll be there. I didn't thank him. We weren't in that kind of conversation. I just ended the call and sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at nothing. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was precision, like turning a key in a lock that had rusted shut years ago. There was no pride, no vindication, only the cold rhythm of necessary steps. Victoria had always used her father like a shield, dangled him as an authority figure, someone I should aspire to, someone whose approval I should crave. Every disagreement ended with a jab, Maybe I'll ask Dad what he thinks. Every financial argument ended with a smug reminder. Dad says you're too careful with money, that you're playing life safe. Now she'd see what safety really looked like. It wore a suit, read contracts at breakfast, and delivered truths without raising its voice. Robert wasn't my ally, but for one morning, he'd be my instrument. And the moment she stepped out of that Uber with her sunglasses and smirk, ready to walk into the life she thought was still hers, he'd be waiting, with a white envelope in one hand, and the full weight of her lies in the other. The wheels of her suitcase clicked rhythmically against the cracked sidewalk as Victoria strutted up the front path, phone still in her hand, a grin playing on her lips as she typed something into a group chat she would soon pretend didn't exist. The Arizona sun still clung to her skin, golden, glowing, wrapped in the kind of tan that screams, I didn't worry about a thing. Her sunglasses were oversized, designer, and unnecessary. The sky here was gray, overcast. Her mood didn't match the weather. She paused in front of the door, looked at the wreath, still there, still crooked, and smirked. Of course you didn't fix it, she muttered to no one. The key went in like muscle memory. But when she turned it, nothing. A faint click, but not the right one. No give. She frowned. She tried again, slower this time, jiggled it, like she had done 1,000 times before when Alan forgot to oil the lock. Still nothing. She pulled the key out, looked at it like it had betrayed her, then tried again. This time with force. Click, click, deadbolt. Still shut. Are you kidding me? She looked at her phone. No messages. No alerts. She knocked. Once, twice, then slapped the door with the side of her fist. No answer. She stepped back, confused now, scanning the driveway. Alan's truck was there. The porch light was off. The curtains were drawn. Everything looked normal, just not hers. Her brows drew together. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Straight to voicemail. That was when she heard it. The crunch of gravel. She turned, slowly, like she already knew something was off. And there he was, her father, stepping out of his sedan with careful precision, one hand on the car door, the other holding a white envelope. He didn't call out, didn't wave. He just walked forward, measured steps, suit jacket buttoned even though it was Saturday morning, eyes unreadable behind rimless glasses. Dad, she laughed, nervous and too high-pitched. What are you doing here? He didn't answer, just held the envelope out in front of him like a funeral notice. She blinked, startled, and took a hesitant step forward. Seriously, what is this? Why is the door? He didn't speak, just offered the envelope like it was a chore. His jaw was locked, his mouth a thin line. Dad, she repeated, more forcefully. What is going on? The envelope passed between them without a word. She took it. Her hand trembled slightly, not that she'd admit it, and the moment she tore the flap, she knew. Not because of the paper, not because of the letterhead, but because her father looked at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. The first page was formal. The firm's name at the top, Langston and Fields, Trust and Estate Services. Her eyes skipped to the bold text halfway down the page. Notice of spousal asset reallocation. Irrevocable execution per Trust Clause C. It made no sense at first. Her brain refused to piece it together. Then she saw the next paragraph. Effective as of September 8th. Your name has been legally removed from all Callister family trust assets, property holdings, and fiduciary authorizations. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The second page had her signature. From years ago, a consent form she barely remembered signing. She was smiling in the photocopy, her own initials next to a clause she never read. She flipped to the third page and stopped breathing. There it was. The house title. Signed over. Fully. Irrevocably. Into a trust. Alan's trust. Her name nowhere on it. She looked up at the door. Her door. Her porch. The kitchen behind it she used to complain about, but secretly loved. The hallway where the kids' height marks were still carved into the molding. Gone. All of it. Alan, she whispered. Her father finally spoke. He's inside. Her head whipped toward him. Then why? He asked me to hand that to you, Robert said, voice low. And I agreed. Because I read it first. Why would you? He cut her off with a look. Not anger. Disappointment. Worn thin and bitter. You lied to me, he said. You used my name. My signature. She froze. That's not true. Don't, he said. Just don't. The suitcase tipped over behind her. Her hands were shaking now, but she clutched the papers like they were life rafts. Like she could still argue her way out of them. This isn't legal, she muttered. He didn't just, her father replied. He planned. And you helped. The wind picked up slightly. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. She didn't push them back up. From behind the door, nothing. No footsteps. No explanation. Just absence. The kind that made you realize you were on the outside of something that used to belong to you. She stepped forward, knocked again. Harder. Alan, what the hell is this? Silence. Then, through the window, a shadow moved. A light clicked on briefly in the entryway. The silhouette of a man stood still behind the frosted glass, then turned and walked away. She stood there, breathing like she'd run a mile, still holding the letter. Her father beside her, but not touching her. What did you do? She whispered. To him. To the man behind the door. To herself. No one answered. The wind tugged at the corner of the envelope as Victoria clutched the pages like they might evaporate if she loosened her grip. She hadn't sat down. She couldn't. Her suitcase still lay tipped on the porch like a relic from a different life, and her feet wouldn't move past the threshold she no longer owned. Her father stood a few paces back, arms crossed over his chest, silent, waiting, not for answers, but for confirmation of something he already suspected and didn't want to believe. She flipped the first page again, scanning it for loopholes. There weren't any. Trust restructuring, Clause C enforcement. Executor, Alan B. Callister. Beneficiaries, children of the union, minor and of legal age. Spouse, removed by majority consent of trustee and beneficiary clause protections. No emotion, no anger in the ink. Just the dry language of irrevocable decisions. Dates, signatures, notarized stamps. The stamp hit hardest. It made it real in a way her brain couldn't dodge. She was legally removed from the house, the accounts, the assets she hadn't even known were tied to the trust. The car? In the trust. The savings account she thought was joint. Trust managed. Even the kids' summer camp reimbursements. She saw them listed under educational disbursements. Children only. She turned to the second page. Custody agreement. Temporary placement pending review. Visitation permitted. Residence established in primary dwelling, held by trust. That was the moment her knees buckled slightly. Not because of the custody. It wasn't a full removal, but because she realized Alan had thought about it. Planned it. Not in anger. Not as a knee-jerk reaction. But with precision. With calm. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't begged. He'd quietly removed her access to her own world. And then, as if the legal dissection weren't enough, she found the third page. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. For sentences. Simple. Blue ink. Familiar handwriting that she'd once loved enough to keep birthday cards for years. I won't shield your secrets anymore. Your father deserves to know how you funded those girls' trips. Ask him about the scholarship fund audit. There's a copy in the folder he's holding. She didn't even look at him before lunging. Dad, give me that. But he was already holding the other folder to his chest, tight, his jaw clenched. You took money from the scholarship? He asked, voice thin. It's not what you think. He opened it. Right there. On the porch. She could see the bold letters. Callister Hensley Scholarship Fund. Annual Activity Report. The dates. The withdrawals. 5 in total. All marked Educational Consulting. All routed through an auxiliary account under her maiden name. What the hell did you do, Victoria? Her father said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cracked at the edges like old porcelain. He flipped the pages too fast at first, then slower as he found what he was looking for. The deposit trail leading directly into a travel rewards Visa account. Her name. Her birth date. Her signature. Don't do this out here, she hissed. But it was too late. A neighbor across the street paused on their front lawn. Curtains shifted in the window of the house next door. Is this how you paid for Sedona? He said louder now. She stepped forward, voice dropping. Dad, don't dad me, he snapped. His hands were shaking. Not from rage. From something worse. Betrayal. You lied to me, he said. You used my name to steal from children. From your children. I didn't steal, she hissed. He held the report up between them, as if the paper alone could block the lie. This says otherwise. She glanced back at the front door. Still closed. Still locked. Still nothing from Alan. She could feel it now, the unraveling. Not just her marriage. Not just her image. But the scaffolding of safety she'd built through manipulation and charm. It was collapsing under the weight of something she didn't understand at first. Evidence. Facts. Signatures. Paper. Alan hadn't come at her with emotions. He'd come with receipts. Her voice grew small. I can explain it. It was just temporary. Her father took off his glasses and looked at her directly, eyes rimmed with something far older than fury. You've spent years blaming him, he said. Mocking him. Making me think he was weak. I let it happen, he continued. Because I thought you were the one being neglected. But this, he tapped the report with the back of his hand. This isn't neglect. This is fraud. This is theft. And you didn't just lie to your husband. You lied to me. She tried to reach for the paper again, but he pulled it back. You used my legacy, my name, to pay for goddamn massages and mimosas. That one landed. Square in the chest. Because she remembered that Sedona trip too well. The matching robes. The fake Instagram captions. The man she barely knew but wanted to impress. The lie she texted Alan about needing mental health clarity. Where are the kids? She asked suddenly, throat dry. With Alan. Why didn't they answer the phone yesterday? Because he didn't want you calling them from another man's hotel room. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Not empty, dense. Weighted. Like every word spoken so far had saturated the air between them with consequence. She looked down at the letter again. Not the printed parts. The handwriting. For lines. I won't shield your secrets anymore. Your father deserves to know. Alan hadn't just exposed her. He'd handed the torch to someone who could burn her far worse. She crumpled the page without thinking. Robert didn't react. He just turned and walked back to his car, leaving her on the porch with nothing but a dead key in her pocket, a crumpled letter in her hand, and the first terrifying realization that she had no idea what else Alan had prepared. Because if he'd been this quiet about the trust, the house, the scholarship, what else was waiting? It was a Tuesday. The kind of day Victoria used to breeze through like a queen walking across her marble floor. Heels clicking, phone buzzing, latte in hand, co-workers parting like the Red Sea. She had spent years crafting that office persona, stylish, in control, the one with the sharpest blazer and the sharpest tongue. But not this Tuesday. She walked in slower, paler, her makeup heavier than usual, as if contour could cover panic. The staff in the hallway didn't part this time. They just nodded without eye contact. Two of them stopped whispering when she passed. One didn't even bother hiding the side glance. Victoria knew something was wrong the moment she saw Linda, the senior VP's assistant, waiting outside her door. Linda had never once spoken to her unless prompted. Now she was standing with a clipboard and a tight, overly polite smile. Hi, Victoria. Could you join us in Conference C? Mr. Yates would like a word. Mr. Yates, the director of operations. Normally, she only saw him during fundraising galas and quarterly reports. For him to request a private meeting without notice meant one thing. Something was on fire. Victoria adjusted her blouse collar and followed, heartbeat creeping into her throat. Conference C was a cold, sterile room with too many chairs and not enough warmth. Yates was already seated. Alone. A thick manila folder on the table in front of him. Unlabeled. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't even sat down yet. Have a seat, he said. No smile. No handshake. Just flat professionalism. She tried for confidence, even crossed her legs the way she always did during negotiations. Is this about the Colorado grant? We're ahead of schedule. I just sent out a... He held up a single hand. Not rude. Just final. We received a packet, he said. From someone affiliated with the Callister Family Foundation. Her lips parted, then closed. I wasn't aware there were any current intersections between your personal foundation and this organization, he continued. She cleared her throat. It's not really personal. I mean, yes, my husband helped set it up years ago, but I've managed the professional arm independently since. He flipped open the folder. She saw numbers, copies of forms, reimbursement breakdowns, not her originals. These had notes written on them in a stranger's hand. I'm going to ask this once, and I'd like a clear answer, he said. Did you use emergency grant disbursement funds allocated for travel related to humanitarian logistics for personal expenses? That depends on what you mean by. Victoria, he said, sharper this time. The report shows multiple flight charges, luxury hotel stays, wellness retreat entries, and rideshare services all marked under the field travel column. You signed those approvals. You logged the destinations. And none of them match your internal calendar. We cross-checked. Her skin went cold. She tried to pivot. Look, I know how this looks, but most of those trips were dual purpose. I had contacts I met, donors, potential outreach coordinators. Some things had to be informal to get results. We've also been contacted by your husband's attorney, he said flatly. The sentence stopped her like a gunshot. He included full documentation, scans of the trust reimbursement logs, his own corroborating reports, and a letter requesting that your foundation activities be reviewed under the nonprofit compliance agreement we signed during the last ethics audit. Her breath went shallow. Alan hadn't just kicked her out of the house. He'd reached into her professional life. And he'd done it with receipts. Why wouldn't you come to me directly? She asked, voice cracking. We could have resolved this internally. Yates closed the folder. Because this isn't internal anymore. She tried to speak, but the words stumbled. I can explain. Victoria, he said, now quiet but firm. We're placing you on administrative leave. Effective immediately. You're kidding. This is not a judgment. It's a procedural action pending review. The board has been notified. Legal has been copied on the file. She felt the heat rise behind her eyes. No, not like this. Not here. Not in the one place where she was still respected, still powerful, still someone. I've built everything here, she snapped. I've raised more money than anyone in this building. I negotiated the Patterson deal. I ran the entire Bolivia portfolio solo. You're telling me one confused report is enough to? No, Yates interrupted. I'm telling you a pattern of behavior, documented over 2 fiscal years, and now corroborated by your spouse's legal counsel is enough. Especially when the funds in question include restricted donations and grant-matched government dollars. She stood. Too quickly. The chair scraped back behind her like a scream. I need to speak to the board directly. They'll reach out. Through formal channels. Do you believe I did anything wrong? She asked, almost desperate now. I don't have to believe anything, he said. The paper does. She didn't remember leaving the room. Not exactly. Just flashes. Linda's eyes as she walked past. The sound of her own heels moving too fast. A sinking panic that tightened with every step, every look from colleagues who now knew, or thought they did. Back in her car, she finally let her hands shake. 2 days ago, she had been untouchable. Untouchable. Now the house was gone. Her father had gone radio silent. Her kids were with a man who hadn't raised his voice once, but had, in a matter of days, dismantled her life like he'd been waiting. And now her job? Her career? The final castle? Alan hadn't just pulled the rug. He'd burned the floorboards. She stared at the dashboard, then at the notification bar on her phone. One new email. Subject, formal notification of leave, compliance review pending. Alan's fingerprints weren't on it, but she could feel them. Cold, quiet, inevitable. It was supposed to be damage control. A reset dinner. The kind where family pretends everything is salvageable if they just clink glasses hard enough. Victoria's mother called first. Her voice syrupy with forced optimism, as if the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. We thought a nice dinner would do everyone some good. Robert wants to talk things through. We'll make your favorite, chicken marsala. Maybe if Alan sees you're ready to make amends. She left the rest hanging like bait. Victoria said yes, of course. Not because she thought Alan would come, but because she needed witnesses, her parents, her aunt who still thought Alan was just a moody man, her brother who owed her $4,000 from a never-repaid wedding loan. She'd build her case, make Alan look unhinged, victim why, dramatic. Frame it as a marital miscommunication that had spun out of proportion. They'd always believed her side before. Why stop now? Except Alan didn't show. Instead, at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes before dinner was plated, her father received an envelope hand-delivered by courier. No return address. No note. Just a single page folded neatly inside. Victoria didn't know about it until she walked into the dining room and saw the color drain from her father's face like someone had flipped a switch inside him. He was sitting at the head of the table, glasses pushed halfway down his nose, staring at the document like it might rewrite itself if he blinked hard enough. "Dad?" she asked, confused. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer. Not at first. Her mother came in carrying the salad, smiling at nothing. "Well, this looks tense. Let's just..." Robert raised a hand. She froze mid-step. Victoria moved closer, squinting at the paper. At first, she didn't recognize it. Then she did. A bank statement. Her bank. Specifically, the custodial college savings account she'd set up years ago when the twins were still in pre-K. The one with Alan's contributions, automated transfers, tax-deferred growth. The one that made her look like a responsible mother. Except now it was annotated in red ink. 2 withdrawals. One for $2,725.14. Another for $3,480.90. Both labeled Girls WKND, AZ, and Sedona Holistic Experience. Next to the second one, someone, Alan's attorney probably, had printed. Note, these funds are tax protected for educational use only. Misuse may result in federal penalties. Her mouth went dry. Her father looked up. Not angry, not even disappointed. Just hollow. "I co-signed this account," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know they'd send you that," she said quickly, stepping forward. "I can explain." "Explain what, Victoria?" he asked, lifting the page. the paper trembling slightly in his hand. That you pulled money meant for your children's future to fund a spa trip with someone else's husband? Her mother gasped. What? That's not what happened, Victoria snapped. You named the withdrawal, he said. Girls' weekend AZ. I've seen the pictures. Do you think we're all idiots? It was temporary, she said, desperate now. I meant to put it back. When? Silence. She couldn't answer because there was no answer. There was no repayment plan, no hidden stash of cash waiting to make it right. She'd spent it on cocktails and massages and poolside selfies that would now outlive her dignity. And Alan, quiet, calculating Alan, had kept the receipts like war trophies. Her aunt cleared her throat. Is this why Alan didn't come? He didn't come, Robert said. Because he already gave us everything we needed to hear. I didn't take from the kids, Victoria said, voice cracking. I took from myself. I funded their lives for years. I carried everything. Birthdays, school supplies, doctor's visits, while Alan sulked in the garage. Her brother snorted under his breath. Oh, go to hell, Jeremy, she snapped. You still live in Dad's guest house. This isn't about Jeremy, Robert said. This is about you. She reached for the document. He pulled it away. You used my name, he said. You put me on a financial time bomb. If the IRS flags this account in an audit, I get questioned. Not Alan. Not your spa therapist. Me. I didn't think it would matter, she said, which was the wrong thing, the worst thing to say. He stood up, folding the paper slowly, methodically, the way he used to fold the morning paper before telling her she couldn't go out in that skirt or that no, a modeling career wasn't a real plan. You used to be the sharp one, he said, not unkindly. Even when you were cruel. At least you were clever. But now you're just lazy with your lies. I'm your daughter, she said. And you made me your accomplice, he replied. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He just placed the envelope on her plate, still warm from the roast chicken beneath it, and left the room. The family stayed. Out of obligation. Out of awkwardness. But the air never recovered. They chewed in silence while Victoria sat motionless at the table, staring at the folded paper like it was a verdict she didn't agree with but couldn't appeal. Alan hadn't needed to show up. He let the truth dine in his place. It was raining. Not a storm. Not dramatic. Just steady, gray rain that dripped from rooftops like a clock ticking down to nothing. Victoria stepped out of the Uber in front of the house she used to call hers, heels clicking against the wet pavement. Her coat was too thin for the weather, but she didn't flinch. She dressed carefully, casual but elegant, hairstyled like she hadn't cried the night before, like she still had control, like this wasn't going to be the final act. Behind her, her father stood at the edge of the curb, hands in his coat pockets, watching. He wasn't walking her up this time. Wasn't speaking. He'd already said what he needed to. He'd done enough. Now he was just a witness. The porch lights were on. That startled her. Alan used to turn them off early, said it saved power. Now they glowed with a quiet, deliberate warmth, like a stage already set. She approached slowly, her suitcase trailing behind her one last time, wheels skipping slightly over the uneven brick path. She stopped at the first step. The door opened before she could knock. Alan stood there, framed by the soft light of the foyer. No coat, no shoes, just a plain navy sweater and that calm, unreadable expression she used to mistake for dullness. He didn't look angry. Worse, he looked finished. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask something, anything. But before she could, he extended his hand. A single manila envelope. No label. No message. She didn't take it right away. What is this? She asked, trying to smile like it was a joke. Like the nightmare would blink and reset. His voice was quiet, unmoved. Finalized documents. Property reassignment. Custody schedule. Trust restructuring. She felt her stomach twist. Alan, you asked me to think about my mistakes, he said, tone as even as a metronome. I did. And I fixed them. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't accuse her. Didn't offer one last plea or threat or sermon. He simply handed her the envelope. And as she took it, her fingers barely brushed his. They used to mean something, those hands. They'd held her up when she gave birth. Held her tight when her mother was hospitalized. They'd built the bookshelf in the twins' room. Repaired the gutters she'd insisted were fine until they weren't. Now those hands didn't reach for her. They closed the door. Not a slam. Just closed. Clicked shut with a finality that made the air feel colder. She stood there for a long moment. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Behind her, the rain continued, soaking into her coat, into her hair, down the back of her neck. She could feel the document inside the envelope growing heavier in her hand, as if it knew what it contained. She looked down at it, half expecting a note. But there wasn't one. Of course there wasn't. The words had already been said. Or rather, not said. Alan's silence had become its own kind of language. Not angry, not cruel, just done. She turned, finally, to find her father still watching from the car. He didn't wave. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply turned, opened his door, and got in. Even he was done offering doorways to knock on. Victoria stood alone in the drizzle, envelope clutched like a gravestone rubbing, trying to process the finality. No screaming, no lawyers, no war, just precision, an absence, and a locked door. She had wanted space, freedom, escape. Now she had it, and it felt like exile.